Right now, you're wearing something. You probably didn't think about that decision for more than a few seconds this morning. Grabbed whatever was nearby, maybe checked the weather. Either way, you put something on before walking out the door, because that's what humans do. Every culture on Earth, in every climate, across every era of history, wears clothes. You've probably heard the explanations: warmth, modesty, protection. Except none of those are the real reason we started covering ourselves. Let's start with what we actually know. Anatomically, modern humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years, but bone needles and hide scraping tools only appear in the fossil record around 120,000 years ago. Most textile historians place the widespread adoption of clothing even later, around 75,000 years ago, which means for at least the first half of our existence, we walked around naked under the African sun, dealing with thorns, insects, and cold nights with nothing on. That immediately kills the most common explanation: warmth. Yes, humans eventually moved into colder climates where clothing became essential. But clothing shows up while we were still in the tropics, before the migration north, before the Ice Age. Warmth is a consequence, not the cause. The next answer people reach for is protection. Thorns, rocks, insect bites, and sure, that's part of it. But there's a problem. If protection were the main reason, clothing would have started on the parts that actually took the most damage: feet, hands. Instead, the earliest clothing in almost every culture covered the torso and groin first, the areas least exposed to danger. That's not purely practical. That points to something else. In 2003, a group of geneticists studied something unexpected: lice. Specifically, the split between head lice and body lice. Head lice live in hair. Body lice live in clothing. They literally cannot survive without fabric. They need fibers to lay their eggs. So scientists traced when the two species diverged. That gives a biological timestamp for when humans started wearing clothes consistently enough for an entirely new parasite to evolve around the habit. The answer? Approximately 170,000 years ago. Not a needle, not a tool. A parasite gave us the oldest hard evidence for clothing in human history. But that date still doesn't tell us why. It tells us when the behavior was already established. The actual reason goes deeper. In 2009, archaeologist Ian Gilligan published an analysis arguing that clothing wasn't a practical invention. It was a cognitive one. To wear clothing, you have to imagine a future version of yourself. You look at an animal hide, you picture yourself wearing it later. You plan how to turn it into something usable. Then you do it. That sounds simple. It's not. It requires memory, planning, and the ability to imagine something that doesn't exist yet. No other animal does this. A chimpanzee doesn't look at a leaf and think about how it might be useful tomorrow. We did. And the moment we started clothing our bodies, we weren't just covering skin, we were demonstrating for the first time that we could think ahead. Clothing is one of the earliest physical artifacts of the modern human mind. Here's what almost nobody mentions. Humans lost their body hair roughly 1.7 million years ago. Not 300,000. Not when Homo sapiens appeared. 1.7 million. Long before our species even existed. The reason was temperature. Our ancestors started hunting during the hottest part of the day, when every other predator rested, and body hair trapped too much heat. Losing it meant we could sweat efficiently and outlast anything we chased. But losing hair also meant losing UV protection. So dark skin evolved almost immediately after to compensate. The real sequence is, body hair disappears first, dark skin evolves as a replacement, and then hundreds of thousands of years later, humans reinvent their own covering. But this time, by choice. We essentially rebuilt our own skin from scratch. Except the second version came with a meaning the first one never had. Before clothing, humans were already decorating themselves. Blombo's cave in South Africa contains evidence of red ochre, a pigment ground into paste, being applied to human bodies 100,000 years ago. Ochre kits, grinding stones, shells used as containers, pigment mixed with fat and bone marrow. These people were painting themselves before they had advanced needles, before they had sewn garments. The impulse to control how you appeared to others was already built into the species, long before the first thread was pulled through the first hole, and humans weren't the only ones doing it. In Denisova Cave in Siberia, archaeologists found a sewing needle made from bird bone, 50,000 years old, and it wasn't made by Homo sapiens. It was made by the Denisovans, a completely separate human species we only discovered existed in 2010. Meanwhile, Neanderthal sites across Europe have turned up eagle talons with deliberate cut marks, and raptor feathers arranged in patterns, almost certainly worn. 3 different human species on 3 different continents, all independently developing the urge to cover and decorate themselves. That's not coincidence. That's biology. Around 25,000 to 35,000 years ago, humans carved hundreds of small female statuettes, what archaeologists call Venus figurines, found from Spain all the way to Siberia. They're usually described as depictions of the human body. But look at the details. Many show elaborately braided hair, woven belts, armbands, and head coverings, carved in stone with careful precision. These weren't just bodies being depicted. They were dressed bodies, styled bodies. The people carving them thought it was important to show what was being worn. That tells you everything. 30,000 years ago, humans weren't just wearing clothes. They were already thinking carefully about which ones. As human groups grew larger, clothing became something else entirely, a technology. Before you could speak to a stranger, their clothing told you everything. What tribe they came from, whether they ranked above or below you, whether they were safe. Archaeologists can now trace ancient trade routes by following specific pigments and shell beads found in body decoration thousands of miles from their source. People were trading specifically to get the materials to signal who they were, long before money, long before writing. What you wore told others everything before you opened your mouth. The stakes around that signaling got so serious that entire legal systems were built around it. Sumptuary laws, laws controlling what you were allowed to wear based on your rank, appeared in ancient Rome, medieval Europe, feudal Japan, and imperial China. In Rome, only the emperor could wear Tyrian purple, a dye that required thousands of sea snails per garment. In medieval Europe, you could be fined for wearing fur above your social class. In 15th century Florence, there were government officials whose only job was walking the streets making sure nobody was dressed above their station. Clothing wasn't just communication, it was law. And none of this was ever about the cold. The Yanomami people of the Amazon, the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Islands, cultures where warmth was never a factor, where minimal clothing was practical and sufficient. They still decorated themselves. Body paint, feathers, tattoos, elaborate patterns that communicated exactly who they were, where they came from, what they'd done. Because the body was never just a body, it was always a message. In 2012, psychologists Adam Galinsky and Hajo Adam ran an experiment. They gave participants identical white lab coats. Half were told it was a doctor's coat. Half were told it was a painter's coat. Then they ran attention and focus tests. The people who believed they were wearing a doctor's coat performed significantly better. On the exact same fabric, with the exact same design. What you wear doesn't just signal something to others. It changes how you think about yourself. Ancient humans figured this out 170,000 years ago. Science confirmed it in 2012. The real reason humans started wearing clothes has nothing to do with temperature. It has everything to do with becoming the kind of creature that understands it's being watched and decides to do something about it. If this changed how you think about getting dressed, leave a comment below. And the next video is about something else your body does that goes back further than you think.